So the topic that I chose to discuss with you all today is about conflict. Conflict is very unavoidable. It happens every day. We all run into conflicts with whether it's a husband, a boyfriend, a sibling, your mother, your teacher, your boss. There's always somebody that we can get in a conflict with. So it's important to know what steps to take when you do come across the conflict, and to know how to handle the situation, or should I say how to best handle the situation. So the very first thing that I would like to discuss is the fact that a conflict is not a conflict unless all parties are aware of the conflict. For example, if you are very upset about something and you give somebody the cold shoulder and you just are boiling inside, you personally feel like there's a major conflict and you are very, very upset, but you have never expressed yourself to the other person to show them that you are upset, then the conflict is not existing. The conflict is only existing in your head. But there's absolutely no way to be able to resolve a situation like that unless both parties are aware of the conflict and are able to discuss the conflict and work out the problem. So I thought that was interesting as I was reading, because I feel like we've all been there when we get upset about something, but we don't necessarily want to talk to somebody about it or confront that person about it. Instead, we just boil it in and keep it all inside. And it usually ends in a bigger explosion that way than just approaching that person and explaining how you feel. Another thing that I thought was interesting is that you don't actually have to verbally communicate a conflict with somebody, but expressing yourself by the silent treatment, by a dirty look perhaps, or by, giving them the cold shoulder. Those are all responses to help the other person acknowledge that you are upset about something without you being the one to confront them. So a lot of times in situations like that, if you feel that you are unable to verbally communicate how you are feeling, probably not ideal, but one of those tactics might work to make them at least aware of the fact that you are upset. And then perhaps maybe they will come to you and say, hey, what's the matter? What did I do wrong? And then from there, you will be able to communicate and figure out the problem. So I thought that was interesting. A conflict is not really a conflict unless both parties are aware of the conflict. The next thing that I want to talk about is how beneficial conflicts can be. I know that sounds silly when you say it, because a conflict is never a fun thing to be in, and it never is like a fun thing to talk through and work out. But conflicts are actually very beneficial. I actually have been married to my husband for 5 years, and I have learned firsthand that conflicts are the only way to get past a problem, to be able to actually resolve a problem and to progress in that relationship. So I've found that if we do have any sort of conflicts, if we ignore the conflict usually comes back up. The same conflict will come back up. And it will do so until we are able to actually come to a conclusion and work through that conflict. And then once we're able to do that, most of the time the conflict goes away and it's not there anymore. But I actually know of a lady that got divorced that I was talking to a while back, and she was saying how her and her husband never fought. And she thinks that's one of the biggest reasons that her and her husband got divorced, was because they just didn't care. When they had issues with each other, they just held it all in or ignored each other, and there just wasn't any sort of like togetherness to progress in their relationship. They didn't work out their problems to get to a better place. So I think that's really interesting too, because I think a lot of people hate conflict, which obviously we all hate conflict, but it's interesting to see the other side of it, that when there is conflict, that relationship that you're having the conflict in will get a lot stronger once you are able to resolve that conflict. The last thing that I want to discuss is the different conflict styles. There are several different styles, and I found this really interesting when I was reading. because the one that always came to my mind was compromising. You're supposed to compromise in a conflict, right? That's what I always thought. Well, turns out a compromise, though it's still maybe a fine way to resolve a solution sometimes, but a compromise is actually a lose-lose situation. Both parties end up having to give up a little bit of something in order to agree with the other person. So nobody fully wins in that situation. Both parties end up being a little bit upset or a little bit bitter about something because they don't get their way completely. The next style of conflict is competing, which is when, say, I had a conflict with my mom, then competing would be that I don't care about her feelings, I don't care how she feels, I'm good, it's my way or no way. So that would be a win-lose. I might win and get what I want, but she would lose and be upset and bitter. So competing would be considered a win-lose situation. Accommodating is opposite of that. So if I were to conflict with my mom and she were very, very strong-headed and decided that that's how it was going to be and there's no way around it, then she would win and I would lose. I would just be accommodating and just say, I don't care anymore, just whatever, do what you want. So again, that is another style of conflict that is a lose-win, win-lose. Neither one party is really happy and the other party is not so happy. So that's competing and accommodating are the two that end in that result. There's two more. The one that I think of is avoiding, which I kind of discussed earlier, but avoiding a conflict is when neither parties discuss it. They just avoid it and hope that one day it will go away. It's a lose-lose. You're not fully happy because you haven't got your way and you haven't been able to work through the problem. So both parties end up being just bitter and frustrated with each other without actually communicating the issue. The last one that seems to be the very most efficient and the best result would be considered collaborating, which I've never heard this term when it came to conflict, so I thought this was really interesting. Similar to compromising, although compromising is a lose-lose, compromising is when everybody sacrifices a little bit to make each other happy. Collaborating is when you have two separate ideas and you're able to conform those ideas together and result in a win-win. So an example of that I had this year was my husband and I got in a little conflict about where and how we were going to get our Christmas tree. In the past years, we've gone up on the mountain with my family and cut down our Christmas trees and had a live tree in our house. My husband, on the other hand, always grew up with a fake tree and he always wants a fake tree. So he's like, no, let's just go buy one at Target. We can just get a tree. It'll last us a few years. It'll probably be cheaper in the long run. So we decided to collaborate our ideas. And instead of going up on the mountain and doing the hassle of cutting down a tree, and instead of buying a fake tree, we decided to collaborate and go to a tree lot and buy a tree off of the tree lot. So it was just kind of funny, but it made me realize that it was actually kind of a compromise. It wasn't a compromise, sorry. It was a collaborating tactic because he was happy that we didn't have to go up on the mountain, and I was happy that I still got a real tree. So anyways, it's interesting. There's a lot of different forms of conflict. And like I said, it's unavoidable. So it's important to know the best ways to resolve conflict so that you can progress that relationship with the person that you are conflicting with. So anyways, hope you guys have a great night.